So I went to see Star Trek Beyond the other day. I was not impressed. It's not as bad as Into Darkness was, but that's not saying much. I only know it's better because I could sit all the way through Star Trek Beyond. So I guess it's not a disaster, but it is seriously disappointing. Uh, I want to avoid any major spoilers, but I can't help a few minor ones. So if you're planning on seeing the movie and you don't want to know anything at all beforehand, then you might not want to watch this. Do feel free to come back and watch it after you've seen the movie, though. But this movie, it's not much of a movie at all. It's just fight and chase and shoot with special effects inserted. It's a really bad action movie. It fails even just as an action movie. Star Trek is supposed to be character driven. In the 2009 film, which I really did like, the characters that we're all familiar with all had their moments. They all contribute. They all get the chance to shine. In this, most of them don't even really have to be there. Scotty has a significant role, which is no surprise. Simon Pegg plays Scotty, and he co-wrote the screenplay. I don't think that's a coincidence. Maybe it is. But Sulu and Uhura and Chekhov, if they hadn't bothered to show up, it wouldn't have been any different. Sulu, I'll admit, has one important moment when a ship takes off and he's piloting it. Uhura, though, she gets to wear some relevant jewelry, and Chekhov gets to follow Captain Kirk around. Like I said, even the action in it, since that's obviously what it was made for, the action was not good. It's real cheesy. It's nonstop with... it's the kind of action film that is all too common these days, where it's a little bit of action and then an explosion, and then a little bit of action and a stunt, and then a little bit of action, something else to break up the fight that doesn't go anywhere because it's near miss after near miss after near miss, and no one seems to really be getting hurt or injured. It reminds me of the old Batman TV show, the way they have the big fight scene and they'd interrupt it with a sound effect that you could see on the screen to keep the action flowing. That's the way that I see these styles, this style of action film. That this is the way it looks to me. Along with the goofy fight scenes, this movie has these super intense, death-defying moments throughout that fail to excite you, because if it's intense like that all the way through it, then none of it is intense at all. But completely gratuitous little bits of stunt work, like this little piece here.
In the impossible.
That doesn't serve the story at all. I could have used some real Star Trek intensity. If you remember the first time that the Enterprise encountered Romulans, it was in an old episode called Balance of Terror, and that episode is about a battle between two starships. But it's not a fast-paced shoot-'em-up. It's not dramatic action. It's a tactical challenge for the Enterprise. And if you can't handle writing that kind of story, then you probably shouldn't be writing Star Trek. They added a new character to add, yet another distraction to it, who doesn't have to be there. Jay Lee, I think her name is, not exactly a memorable character. You've seen her in the trailer, I'm sure, the stripe-faced alien woman with the kung fu skills. She's in it pretty much to supply the obligatory badass chick, because that's one of our modern cliches now. Movie makers have to make sure that you know that they know that women are not just damsels in distress. See? There's a badass chick in the movie. But that's all she's there for. She has her fight scenes, and to make it seem like she's there for more, she gives them a few little super technological toys, these superglue barricades and holographic illusions, but those are really just excuses for more special effects. Having watched Star Trek my whole life, I've seen them innovate so many strategies with just phasers and tricorders. I don't think they need her little toys, so she doesn't have to be there for that. The only really important thing she does is she takes them to this dilapidated old Starfleet ship. That's one of those minor spoilers that I told you I can't avoid. But I don't think they need her to find that. If they have their tricorders, and they do, they can locate Starfleet technology pretty easily. And besides that, Captain Kirk and Chekhov happen to stumble onto the ship accidentally anyway. So, like I said, she doesn't serve a purpose. The other senselessly bland character is the villain, Krall. His motive for being the bad guy is that he's the bad guy, and that's all there is to him. He wants to wage war on the Federation for the sake of waging war. He believes that societies are strong only during conflict and that peace weakens them. I can't remember any of his dialogue word for word, even though he didn't have a whole hell of a lot of dialogue. But he says things along the lines of, "Your unity and your peace make you soft. Only struggle can bring you strength." And that's his motive for doing what he's doing. And it reminds me of a character from the Pixar film The Incredibles, this guy.
Behold the Underminer! I am always beneath you, but nothing is beneath me! I hereby declare war on peace and happiness!
Yeah. The new Star Trek villain also wants to wage war on peace and happiness. I could complain about a lot of other things in the movie, but like I said, I want to avoid major spoilers, so I won't. The only other thing, the main thing I wanted to complain about, is not my biggest complaint by a long shot, but it's still the thing that I felt I had to talk about, and that's the gay Sulu issue. Now, hearing me say that, it's easy to assume the worst. But before you assume the worst, I'll remind you that I'm not the only person that takes issue with this. George Takei, the man who originally played Sulu, and who is openly gay, he thought it was a really lousy idea. He thinks that if they wanted to include a gay character, they could have introduced a new character, instead of altering an existing character that we're all familiar with. And he's right. That Simon Pegg, I'm sure, expected George Takei to just be thrilled and talk about how wonderful they were. And when that didn't happen, he had to answer that. He respectfully disagreed. Let's see here. His response was, he's right. It is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the screen version of the most inclusive, tolerant universe in science fiction hasn't featured an LGBT character until now. We could have introduced a new gay character, but he or she would have been primarily defined by their sexuality, seen as the gay character, rather than simply for who they are. And isn't that tokenism? I really wish he would have put as much effort into writing his screenplay as he did in writing that little press release. But the answer is no. No, that would not have been tokenism. Not if you can write, because you can introduce a new character and establish that character's personality and motives and background, and then, after that character is developed in the minds of the audience, then you can reveal the character's sexuality, and you have not taken anything away that you've already established. That is, if you're capable of establishing a new character. Considering Jaylee and Krall, if I'm getting their names right, they're not too talented at doing that. So I see why they didn't want to. They couldn't. But making Sulu gay, that is tokenism. The reason is their motive for doing it. They did not do that because it advances the story, and they certainly did not do it because it was appropriate to the character. They did it to show off. I know that because they announced it before the movie was released. They wanted to receive the recognition for their gay character. They wanted the accolades. And that's not the right reason for doing it at all. What are they trying to say, anyway? That in between beam-ups and phaser blasts and explosions, it's really important to see as much diversity as possible. They would have us believe that this paint-by-numbers action film has a heart in the right place. But they're just stroking their own egos and come to see our inclusive worldview and be a part of it by watching our martial arts motorcycle film. No, I don't believe that they did that because they thought it was the right thing to do. They did it in order to show off. Besides that, I reject the need for diversity in stories anyway. It's not the diversity that bothers me. It's the need for diversity. It's the word need. And people act like it's needed. But unless diversity is the subject of your story, then diversity is not necessary. And that's not to say you can't include diversity. By all means, go ahead. That's great. But don't pretend that it's necessary or that it's unfortunate if certain kinds of characters are excluded. That's really a horrible point of view. I reject the notion that people can only associate with characters that represent them. That's certainly not true of me. I can associate with characters who are straight or gay or black or Jewish. I can sympathize with a sympathetic robot. So I do not believe in the divisions that a need for diversity requires. We're all human. We can all relate to each other. And I believe that. That used to be an admirable point of view. It used to be what everyone was supposed to believe. And anymore it's become politically incorrect. And that's just tragic. And the real reason that it's politically incorrect is that if you really believe that, then people don't get to celebrate the fact that they've introduced gay characters or whatever else they're trying to do to show off. But the reason that this is so important to me is that I am an author. And granted, no one's ever heard of me. But I take my writing very seriously. You know, maybe 200 people have read my books, ebooks rather. But I take my writing more seriously than the writers of Star Trek take their writing. And the reason I wanted to discuss this is that I am currently writing a science fiction novel. And one of the characters in my novel is homosexual. Very important character. And I wouldn't want anyone to think that I did that for the same reason that the Star Trek writers decided to make Sulu gay. Because unlike them, I would not want to be congratulated for including a gay character. Because it's nothing. It's just not that important. It is not a victory for humanity to have more gay science fiction characters. It's not insignificant, I'll grant you that, but it's not needed, and it's certainly not some moral milestone that we can all celebrate. It's just not that important. And getting back to Star Trek, in this case, it just wasn't done right anyway. A more talented storyteller could have used the inclusion of a gay character. It's something they could have had some fun with if they'd have done it right. If I had been in the position to write a Star Trek screenplay, and if I had decided to include a gay character, I would have done what George Takei has suggested since. I would have made a new character, and as I said, I would have established that character as firmly as possible until the time came to make the big reveal. Imagine if a female alien were to catch the eye of Captain Kirk, and that happens all the time. I think it would be hilarious if his advances were rejected. She could say something along the lines of, "I'm so sorry, Captain. I don't know if your culture has a word for it, but I prefer the affections of females." Leaving a bewildered Kirk to watch her walk away and for him to realize that he's never going to win there. That would have been funny. Wouldn't that have made it a joke, though? Well, no, actually. That doesn't mean you're not taking it seriously. That just introduces the idea with a joke. And it would have been a joke entirely in keeping with the spirit and traditions of Star Trek. And that's a scene I would have liked to see.